We are live coming here with another Stir the Pod podcast show. I am your host, Alex, and tonight we are joined by Andy. Andy, how we doing tonight?
What up? What up?
And we are without Trev. We are sans Trev already, episode 2. He kind of gave up early, much like much like Chauncey, much like Jessica from last week. But and we got no MVP, LVP. That's fine. But it is better than his little, half-ass, like tuning in late, pretending like he saw the episode. We all gurp at that. So we told Trev to just sit this one out. But with that being said, episode 2 here, just opening thoughts. Episode ended 6 minutes ago. What do we think?
I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. I thought it was better than last week's. It had me entertained the whole time. Again, like my litmus test is always like, do you check your phone thinking like, let's hurry this shit up? I actually checked my phone only to figure out like where we were at in the episode. And with like 30 minutes to go, like they were about to go to voting, then do elimination. So it was like, all right, I'm in. Like I thought it flowed smoothly. We'll talk about obviously each piece of it, but I thought it was a good episode top to bottom. I'd give it like a maybe a 7.6.
Ooh. Yeah, I like this episode. I enjoyed watching this one more than I did last week. And I think my favorite thing about it was that we saw people playing the game. We saw a lot of different alliances. We saw US versus UK. We saw the Jay's little alliance that he's forming. We saw the rookie girls from last season had a big powwow. So like you finally got to see sort of like sides being taken, where I feel like last week you didn't really get that. And I do think again it didn't drag on as much as last week, but I feel like we could have cut out about 10 minutes of it. But aside from that, I do feel like this was a very entertaining episode front to back.
And you know what helps during the in between the daily and the deliberation? It always helps getting a change of scenery. Like when they went to the club, it just, I don't know if that's just me being like a child and, oh, it's something new on, but it cuts it up. And I do think it helps because like you don't get a 30-minute span of they're just at the house going from one room to the next room. Like even if it's the same conversations, they're at the club, they're having fun, they're having drinks. Melissa's on the stage, Kylan's up there. We'll get into that. But I think it breaks up the whole episode really nicely. So like I was all in for this one.
Yeah, it didn't feel as like, I'm sure on screen we probably did have about the same time as last episode, but it didn't feel like we had as much time between the challenge and deliberation and voting. I feel like everything, because it was so chaotic, even though we're not even in the chaos stage yet, because it was so chaotic, I felt like it was entertaining and it didn't feel like it dragged as much as last week did.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're, especially during COVID times, or if you work from home and you're just in your house all the time, sometimes you just go outside for a little walk. You just change it up. You don't feel like you're just stuck in jail all day. That's what episode 1 felt like. So, yeah. I like it.
Yeah, this was a good change of pace. So let's dive into the episode. We start off with a challenge, or it's not maybe less a challenge tradition and more a stir the pod tradition because we're tracking it. And I think we're probably the two biggest fans here on the pod of the streak. So for any new listeners, the streak is basically the thing the challenge does where the winner of the last episode's elimination is always the first one in the house. We started tracking that a couple years ago. It usually goes like it hits at like a 90+% every single season. And usually the only gap in it is if like there's a weird cutoff episode. And so tonight, Big T won last week's, and Big T was the first one in the house tonight. So that's just what the streak is. It's a great way as we get into the season, especially when it gets longer and longer. It's just a great way to kind of start us off here every week on the podcast. So the streak continues, or the streak starts for this season 39. Big T's first in. And then we have a couple things for the challenge. They were again, just like challenge foreshadowing stuff, setting us up for, later in the show. You had Jay and Chauncey kind of talking about how they're best friends. They did one season together. And then you had Kylan and Melissa talking and flirting, and then they, had their thing at the club later. So what kind of stuck out to you in terms of everything between the streak and the challenge starting?
I'll have to make sure I think about what came before, what came after. But again, that's where, and you kind of alluded to it, that's where like the talks now are starting to be alliances. They're starting to be game. It's not Berna having a meltdown and going to Kim for comfort. It's actual like relevant stuff that I don't mind watching because you can see how it all plays out. Now, granted, I think very early on you could tell Chauncey or Huey was going in. And then they kind of teased us a little bit by the little James and Huey kind of love / friend / sanity relationship. It was kind of like in a murder mystery. We're like, oh, I didn't think it would have been that person. It was James all along who was going in.
I think the James and Huey was later though, right?
Oh, was it? I don't know. I don't know.
I think that was after the challenge. But they definitely, I mean, it's the challenge formula. Everybody who's gonna play a factor in that episode is mentioned early on. So you had like Jay, Chauncey, Huey, James, like all of them were thrown in early, and it was just your classic, challenge foreshadowing early on.
I would just love, and it would probably be almost impossible because, again, a lot of the foreshadowing does come as a result of the conversations that are being had. So it's not like they're necessarily manipulating a lot, but I do think it would be just incredible if, like, somehow, some way, the same episode is what it is, and then like they got to the nominations and like Asaf went in, like someone who hadn't been talked about at all. Like they gave him like the D treatment where he's just like not even on camera, and then he gets voted in. That would put a big old smile on my face.
That would actually be the challenge producers almost like in a way doing their job well, doing something that we're not expecting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most of the stuff that happened in the first segment of the episode we'll probably touch on a little bit more later, and it'll probably make a bit more sense. So then they go to the challenge, and I think there's a decent amount to touch on here. So the challenge itself is basically, again, some fuzzy rule clarification that I think we'll probably need some help on. But basically, stop me if you've heard this before. There's a giant apparatus above water, and the 23 people have to basically get 23 balls with their names on them up on a human ladder on 2 different ropes on a platform, and they have to drop the balls in there. Each one is $2,000, and so if they get all 23, they get 46,000. But if they do it in 23 minutes, which I think is the time limit, it was 23 minutes. Yeah. If they get all 23, they get an extra little $4,000 to make it 50,000 round. And so they do it, and they end up getting 3 balls for 6,000 total. So just what do we think about the challenge format, how they did, their strategy, all of that stuff?
So first off, got to give a shout out to the live chat. Live chat's already bumping. Love it. Keep them coming. But yeah, so to kind of pull my Ed from the circle. So there's 23 balls. They've got to get each ball up this big floating apparatus with a human ladder in 23 minutes. Each ball's worth $2,000. You got 23 minutes to do it. If you get them all, you get an extra $4,000 for a total of $50,000. I just had to do that because it gets me. It gets me every time. Coming back from commercial and seeing somebody reiterate the rules just makes me smile. The second that TJ described what they were doing, I knew there was a 0% chance that they were going to get the 50,000. Like literally 0. And we did get our first non-pass fail. And I think the only way you can do that is a situation like this where if it was to be a pass fail, I think you have to like double the time.
Yeah, at
And
least.
yeah, so if you're going to make it where like it is almost impossible for them to do it, then you obviously have to do a percentage eliminate or daily. But I mean, I don't know if it's a nod to the producers or to the contestants. They got $6,000. Like, was it too hard? Was there not enough time? Or are they really just that bad? Because the the pot's nothing. And one other thing to mention about the pot, they threw this in at the beginning of the episode. 500K. Did you see that?
Yeah, what did they say again? I missed that.
They said like one competitor competing to win $500,000.
So
Which
what? Are they automatically going to get that? What's the point of
I
these challenges?
I have no clue. I don't know if that was just like something that wasn't supposed to be there, or like if regardless of what happens, they'll end up making it 500 grand. Like that just came in as a total curveball. But I'll tell you right now, based on the way these dailies are going, they're not going to be getting to 500 grand, not even close.
Yeah, this was it was a fun challenge to watch, but just a terrible performance. I have a few questions about the rules. I think the first one I'll just go with kind of what McCord's asking here too in the live chat is, they made a big deal about how there's 2 rope ladders you can make, and the team of 23 basically split into 2 groups to kind of start forming this ladder. One team did okay, one team did terrible. And then once the team that did terrible realized that they did terrible, they were like, "Oh, let's all just go to the other ladder." Like, so if you are allowed to just do one ladder, first of all, what's the purpose of giving them a second one? And second of all, why wouldn't they all just go to the first one right away? If obviously this was an option for them because that's what they ended up doing. So like, wouldn't you say like, forget this the second one. Let's have our whatever it is, 6, 7 biggest guys clip onto one ladder, and we'll toss up all the girls. Everybody else will go. Like, I don't know if like it was there's stuff they cut out, whatever. I don't know if TJ explained it a little differently, but like I just don't know why that was the play here to kind of like make 2 ladders that each on their own weren't that good. You could have just made one ladder that was just like a giant bridge of guys and thrown up all the girls and thrown up all the balls afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe it was ever told that you had to use them, and I don't think clearly. I think TJ would have yelled at him.
Yeah,
Once they started doing that. Again, I think it's another disadvantage of not having any veterans. Like if that was possible, and you start going, and I'm trying to think of the first person on the bad rope that couldn't get clipped was Nerys, I think.
yes, a couple times.
So the second that happens and one rope just can't figure it out and the other one is almost up, I think that's when you just abandon ship and go right away. You don't keep trying. But again, I think when you got a bunch of rookies who are told you have 2 ropes to build a ladder, they will do that and not take a step back and think what's the fastest way to get everybody up there.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe the challenge producers kind of envisioned them having 2 ropes to do it, because I thought it was going to be more of a factor in the voting. Like they would be like, "Oh, this side of the rope didn't do anything, so we should blame them."
Yeah.
That didn't ended up being as much of the case. But like, if you saw some of the final shots, like the platform at the top was totally tilted one way because you had everybody all the way on one side, which clearly I don't think they were expecting. My other question was, did the names on the balls have anything to do at all?
Yeah.
What was it? Because I saw the first ball that at least that they showed, they put right in the chute. They got like they chalked it up, and then there was like a rack up there where they were putting balls on. So is it the person had to be up there to put the ball in?
Yes. So I think Kim was the first one to put the ball in, and she put in her own ball. But like if Kim tried to put in a ball that said J, it would not have counted. And that's again why. So like the idea is you get the ladder up, You get all the balls up, and then if you've got Michelle's ball, Michelle climbs the people to get up and put it in, and then vice versa, which probably would have made one ladder even easier because then you just make sure whoever's next could even carry their own ball and just climb it up. I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, you could have done. Yeah, that makes sense because I was confused because it felt like they had all the balls there and then they only get 3. That felt kind of weird, but it makes
yeah,
sense. You had to put your name in there, and I feel like if this group were to do it again, or if they had half a brain, what they would do is, again, make one ladder with the strongest guys, send all the girls up, and basically have a group of, the weaker guys, maybe, like Jay and James and Sierra Miss, like that group is kind of like gathering the balls and like getting organized of like, all right, Nerys is next. Here's the ball with Nerys's name. Toss the ball up first. Toss Nerys up. Send them up in order and get the balls in order. And that just wasn't the case at all. And I felt like they just wasted so many people. I mean, they have 23 people, and they just, they did a terrible job with it. To only get 3 out of 23, I mean that's terrible. It's like 5%.
I mean, these people, it just becomes more and more clear they're all just idiots. And it's the perfect example of 2 half brains don't make a full brain. I mean, each one of these people is operating at less than 1/23rd of a brain. I mean, they're all just morons and they just can't figure it out.
Yeah, it was a bad performance, but they at least put some money into their bank account. So they got $6,000. So what are we at now? 306?
306.
306 through 2 episodes.
It could be at 400.
Yeah. So they're 6 out of 100, right? So they're 6 out of possible 100,000 they could have had. So through 2 episodes, they're hitting 6%. So any other thoughts on the challenge before we get back to the house?
Not really. I mean, it was fun to watch, but again, the second he described it, it was like they're not doing this, and it was worse than I expected.
I actually one quick question. I was thinking of this watching it, and then you mentioned it. If they were to say it was a pass fail, and you had a certain amount of time, and you doubled the time, let's say. What I'm wondering is there a scenario where you say it's a pass fail, but there's no time limit? Is there still a chance that they fail? And what I'm thinking of is if you throw these 23 people in and they're doing a shit performance like they did, at what point, 30 minutes in, does somebody just quit? Huey swims away and he says, I'm not doing this. And then, that's the challenge. I think even if they didn't have a time limit, there's still a chance that this group might not finish it.
I think you might be right. And honestly, I think the person who was just getting beat up the most was Horacio at the bottom. He was getting waterboarded.
And so Olivia.
Yes. If you're getting just constantly beat up, you can't breathe. And then to your point, let's say you're doing it to completion and then Horacio has to climb that damn rope. There's just no way.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't even really think about that. So they envisioned the people being clipped at the bottom to then unclip themselves and climb up. Yes. Oh my God. They didn't even get, I mean, if they were to get everybody who wasn't clipped up to one ladder, that'd be 16, 17 balls. They got 3. God. Oh my God. The more we're talking about this, the more it
was just outrageous.
The fact that I think it's kind of on the producers to give them 23 minutes. So I know. 1 minute per challenger.
God.
All right. So I mean, the challenge, it's kind of smirky as we're talking about it, but let's move on to. So they get 3,000, or they get 3 balls for $6,000 total. They go back to the house, and I mean, there's a few different ways we can go here. I feel like the big theme that kind of was over everything was basically, obviously, who we're going to vote in. They kind of all agreed that it was not going to be a girl. It was going to be a guy's day, which I don't know who agreed upon that, but it seemed like they all did. And then they basically decided on Huey or Chauncey. So I guess Chauncey, because he did bad in the challenge, but they all did. Huey, I guess, was more so just because he's Huey. He's probably the worst guy there. Um, so what do we think about those two guys kind of floating up to the surface of everybody else?
I think both of them made sense. Um, Chauncey, I think we had him pretty high on our rankings, but like he could just be in the popcorn muscles category, um, which is never somebody you want to be relying on, especially late in the show. And then Huey's Huey. Um, what Chauncey didn't have going for him is he really had nobody on his side. So like when it came down to who did bad, it's very easy to point to somebody who has no real alliance. Whereas like I'm sure you could probably find somebody else that was in the America alliance who didn't do as good, but then at the same time, um, he was an easy pick. They were both easy picks.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, going back to what I mentioned earlier about like what I enjoyed about this episode is this is where we started to get sides forming, different UK, US. And it's weird how the whole Chauncey thing kind of played out because it was like, Jay and Chauncey, they're best friends and they have this US alliance and it's Jay and Chauncey and Michelle and Mariah and a few other people. And then Jay was like weirdly kind of anti Chauncey the whole time, which he ended up voting him in anyway. But it was kind of like it was Chauncey and Huey, word spreads throughout the house. And then it's just a matter of, all right, it's basically like these idiots are convinced that their only two options are Chauncey or Huey. So then they have to pick out what side they're on. And then we'll get into maybe deliberation in a sec, which is when they actually cast their votes. But then we go to the club. So we go out to the club. The first time this episode, the first time this season, I think we had a few last season. And as I was watching it, one of the questions that went through my mind was, are they actually at, a regular bar or a club where, everybody, there's like human, public people out there. And then in the background on one of the shots, I saw like a mirror in the reflection when just big bold letters, the challenge. So like clearly it was again the challenge, renting out like an entire place for these people to just go and hang out with the same exact people they've been hanging out with. Well, like you said earlier, it was a good change of pace. So what do we think about episode 2? We're going back to the club.
I'm always a big fan of the club, just because I think, and honestly, I think why I like it the most is it tricks these people into thinking we're going out, let's get super dressed up, let's go out and drink. Because nowadays it's just like nobody really drinks at the house, it seems like. And that used to be a staple. Like you didn't have to go out to the club. We would only get like maybe 2 or 3 a season, but people would still be getting drunk and hanging out at the house and all that. So I like that. I think it tricks them into thinking, let's have fun and really be entertaining. I do miss like going to the actual bars, and like you've heard, like there's some stories out there of like Darrell picking up a local and like not even coming back to set for like 2 days, and then he just shows up and wins a daily. Like you don't get those stories anymore. They just like keep these challengers like in a little box like they're teenagers, which definitely takes away from it a bit, but I always enjoy it. I think it's fun.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of if, like, from a production challenge Buna Murray standpoint, maybe what their reasoning would be in terms of sticking to what they did throughout COVID. Because if you think about it, the challenge long before was dialing back on the partying and drinking and all that. But I feel like when we had the first season that was experiencing COVID, like they really had no choice but to, like, when they were sending them out to the club, they had to rent out the whole place to make sure that everybody, was traced and all of that. And I wonder, it seems like it's one of those things where they did it because of COVID and they kept doing it after. And so I wonder like what that reason is, and I'm guessing it has to be something like financially. Like maybe, on an average night they would go out and, they might not show this, but Nelson would, throw a bottle at the bartender and the challenge would get like a $300 fine or something like that. And it was just too much to kind of keep track of. So once they did it once because they had to because of COVID, they were like, yeah, let's just rent out a big ballroom and put all these idiots together. And like you said, convince them that they're all still going out, even though it's just the same people.
So here's what I think. Because first off, and I think that this has been documented in interviews as well. I think if that scenario were to happen, they're pointing right to Nelly T and saying, pay up. And it seems like back in the day, they would get their check like for being there for the week and literally go spend their own money at the bars, which obviously makes it more entertaining because it's like you're at a job, Friday comes around and you just want to start drinking. So it
Yeah.
adds that level. The reason I think they don't do that anymore is one, the fact that social media is rampant around the world. And most of these people have very big social media followings. So I think if they go to a populated place, they will get recognized. And that just creates a whole mess in and of itself. And the second part of that is now they're getting people from all over the world. So, like back in the day, if they're going to, the Czech Republic, nobody's going to know who Bananas is, and he's the face of the show. But nowadays, like you could go to a different country and somebody gets recognized, then it gets out that the whole challenge cast is there, and then it just turns into a scene that they can't handle. That's what I think it is, because I think from a liability financial perspective, I think they would put it right on each contestant. If you want to go out and drink, you're doing it on your own dime.
Yeah, and I mean the challenge, like we've talked about a ton, has just gotten less fun.
Yes.
Less fun over the past 20 seasons. It hasn't been as entertaining, especially from like going out. They're in these foreign places and they just subject them to the same people that they're living in a house with. So, but yeah, I mean, so you go out to the club, and really it's just like more politicking. I do real quickly. I do want to shout out. Going off our last sort of topic there, McCord with just a great comment about a couple seasons ago, kind of coming off of COVID when they did kind of the same thing, but they had the igloo in the backyard, and that was their club. That was their like night out. We're going to the igloo. I wonder. It must have been double agents if I had to guess, because I think
That sounds right.
Total Madness was the season we watched during COVID, so that would have ended just before. I feel like Double Agents was the one that was filmed like in the peak of it. And it's just that's so classic. And that's going to become even funnier as we get like further and further away. Of just like the igloo planted in the backyard, and like that's like, oh, we're going out. Where are you going? The backyard.
The tree house.
To the fucking igloo, and you could tell when they were in there, it was just like all closed in. You couldn't see outside,
And they hated it. I don't know if you remember it, but during that time, like they were miserable. Everyone there would be like, I don't want to be here. I got dressed up for no reason.
And they had, go ahead.
I was gonna say the one thing that I hope we get the next time they get to the club is the bus. The bus is where magic happens.
Yes, and that's just another example of the no fun challenge. The bus used to be a source of the debauchery and some politicking and hooking up and all of that. Really, everything crammed in. We don't even see the bus.
Yep.
So we're at the club. I guess. I mean, again, it's just all kind of things that we've talked about. The teams are forming. The girls are, for example, like Raven. Raven is a girl who says she's working with Nerese and Olivia and Mariah. I guess is some of the girls from last season. And then the second she gets the chance to kind of spread information, she does it. So anything else before we get to deliberation where Chauncey kind of starts digging his own grave?
Yeah, I mean the other highlight scene of the club was the Melissa Kylan kiss.
Yes.
I mean,
Was it a kiss?
no,
Avoiding.
yes. I mean, that was just, and obviously, he told her after the fact that he's got autism and all that, but what a just the whole time. It's just, it reminded me of like The Office, like Scott's Tots, of just like watching it and being like, dude, just kiss her. She's smoking hot. She's way out of your league. The entire house is telling you to kiss her. She's right next to you, telling you to kiss her, and you're just like laughing and chuckling, like, what? It was painful to watch.
It was bad, and it was bad from both standpoints, because as you're watching it, it is kind of weird. I mean, the biggest thing to jump out is like you said, the fact that Kylan is just turning his head to the side, and we get a little bit of explanation about that later on. Um, but I'm more so thinking like the fact that you had 20 grown adults who are all chanting "kiss" to two other grown adults, to a mother. People forget that about Melissa. That they're all like chanting their like. I mean, that this kind of goes back to what we said before. Think about how boring it must be to go out, where like your biggest source of entertainment is Melissa and Kylan, my man, somehow drifting to the top of the stage and then chanting for them to kiss.
Yeah.
Like that's it. That's the peak of the night.
I mean, that's like seventh grade vibes.
Yeah.
I There just needs to be more of it. I don't know. You're right.
It's I mean, but it's like it's one of those where it's cringe watching it, but you're actually weirdly not surprised that this is what the challenge season 39 is like.
Yes.
I mean, we had a reunion show a couple of years ago of somebody singing a song about how they're an alien. That happened.
Actually happened.
That happened in now, guys. And so just the kind of nonsense that we put up with is just a lot different.
And I think a lot of it goes to casting. And Kylan seems like a nice guy. We've only seen him for a very limited time, but like one of the people who I was a fan of, no longer am a fan of. Not a fan of this person, but I thought he fit the challenge perfectly. Was Bear. Imagine if Bear is up there with Melissa or with like Georgia pre, the bomb, and they're all telling him to kiss. He would be like undressing her on the stage. It would just be incredible. But it's because like you have to be cut from a certain challenge cloth to be like flourish in this environment. And I don't think a lot of today's challengers are.
No, not at all. I mean, the bananas and CTs of the world,
Long.
they're cut from a different cloth.
Oh my God.
Let's get into deliberation. So again, they have deliberation. They're outside this time. They all kind of speak up and basically say that the names we're hearing are Huey and Chauncey. Huey kind of pleads his case, which is basically him saying that he's a good competitor and all this stuff. But really, I think the highlight of deliberation is when Chauncey goes and he just gets the shovel out, stabs it into the dirt, and just keeps on digging. When he starts with Horacio and says, "Horacio, have I ever done you wrong?" Yes. "Michelle, have I ever done you wrong?" Yes. And just goes around a circle. And I think the majority, I think without that, Huey probably would have been the House vote. It was close enough to the middle, and then that just kind of swings it. Again, just like similar to Jessica last week.
I first off totally agree. He completely dug his own grave there. I just don't know if I think there's a chance he still could have gotten it because the Americans really did not trust him. That became pretty clear. I think that even though it was one of their own numbers, like there was just on the US guys and US girls were both saying like the last thing we want is people in our alliance that we can't trust, really alluding to Chauncey and Raven both, who seem to have like the tightest alliance, and neither of them helped each other out. And that's why I think like as all the Raven stuff came out, I think both of them kind of got targets on their back. So I mean, he obviously didn't help his case. He could have gone up there and just said, "I had a bad day. I'm gonna try to do better. I always give my all. I'm always a big competitor. Like I want to win money for my family. Like all this stuff." He could have gone so many different directions, and instead he tries to go down the "Have I ever crossed you" path when that's the one path that he's cannot go down. I mean, that makes him losing in the elimination. We'll get into it. That makes him in the losing the elimination look like he's a genius. This was the stupidest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, bringing other people into it was his mistake. I mean, he just could have said, he was doing whatever. And then like the fact that by the time he got to Jay, his best friend, Jay was kind of reading the room and being
Yeah,
like, everybody here has already seen that Horacio and Michelle are throwing them under the bus. And so, even though that is Jay's best friend, he wasn't willing to, stick out for him. So like it was just a bad move on Chauncey's part to get people involved. And then I think the US alliance kind of saw what was happening and just all sort of tacked on.
agreed. And one of the reasons why I think Chauncey was in trouble even before that is when they were talking in like their little bedroom about it, and Chauncey was trying to plead his case to them, and then Jay hit him back with, "Well, if we did vote you in, we'd kind of be giving you the control of seeing."
Yeah, that was bad.
That was the
Yeah.
telltale sign of, buddy, you're toast. You're toast.
Yeah, it's like yeah, we're firing you, but we're gonna let you get to pick what company you
Yeah,
work for next.
exactly.
So, so yeah, that was bad. Chauncey digs himself a grave. We go into elimination, and there was kind of some chicanery with the burn votes, where basically Raven, I think it was Raven, had the idea of like, what if
Yeah,
what if the people you're allowed to pull into elimination with you, you can only pick from the people that said your name, which ended up being just not true. But that kind of just, again, just the thing with these idiots, they hear one little thing and they're like, oh, that's genius. That is what TJ's planning. Of course he's planning that. And so that kind of played a factor into it. So all the UK people try to like burn their votes just so that they can't get called in, which doesn't end up happening anyway. They go through the votes, and Chauncey just kind of ends up being the name. Jay, Michelle, all of his USA Alliance vote him in. So what do we think about it? And then we'll just start kind of, or I guess stop it with him calling in James. So what about Chauncey getting voted in and then picking James to go in with him?
Well, it just cracks me up how we're on episode 2 and we've already got burn votes happening. I don't know if that's ever happened. And we've got burn votes happening on nothing other than a rumor that was started by
Yeah,
another contestant.
on rules that don't exist.
No, and it's episode 2. We've got phantom burn votes on episode 2. These people are idiots. Um, but it happened. Everything goes down. You see Chauncey get voted in. I do like calling out James. Like looking at this elimination, you knew it was going to be endurance, a lot of running, a decent amount of like puzzle and knowledge that had to go into it. Um, James doesn't strike me as somebody who has high endurance or is overly smart. So it was a good call. And I forget who mentioned it in a confessional beforehand, but if you take out James, I mean, that's taken out a strong guy and a strong competitor. So I think it was a smart move by Chauncey in the sense of he could have easily beat him if he had a good plan, and it would have looked really good on paper to take him out.
Yeah, I think I feel like competitor-wise, Chauncey and James are actually pretty equal.
Yeah.
They're, like, both kind of in shape, stronger, bigger guys, but not, like, huge by any means, and they have
James is
some
huge.
well, yeah, he's
They
yeah,
literally
he's
called
a
him the Hulk. He was green.
he was green for a couple seconds. But neither one of them are neither one of them are what they would call puzzle experts. Neither of them are Devins or Wes's by the challenge standards, and so I feel like it was an even matchup. And James, I mean, James was on Radar Watch last week, and he got a lot of airtime. So you probably weren't surprised that he gets called in here. Um, Chauncey calls him in, and they have this weird, fun elimination. I mean, we went on our Twitter live right before this. I actually enjoyed this elimination a lot. I felt like it was something that is similar to eliminations we've seen, but in a new way. And it was, the classic combination of endurance and strategy and strength, a little bit of strength. So I enjoyed this elimination round. What about you?
I do. I did as well. The only thing that I would have liked to have changed is it was deceivingly way more about your strategy and your plan than your endurance because they didn't have a time limit. They both had an equal number of pegs. There wasn't a time limit that you had to have them put in by. So, I mean, Chauncey could have put his last peg in, and James could have still had two left, and he's just taken the two open spots, which could have helped him. So, even though, like, on paper, it's a lot of you want to go fast and you want to, like, get all yours in there first, it is way more important of knowing what you want to do because the timing or the time really didn't matter. You get what I'm saying? And that's the one thing that I think Chauncey just, especially like, he got worse. Like he didn't get better. He got worse throughout the rounds. But it's not, I need to go as fast as I can and put these in. It's, I need to know exactly what I want to do. And then once I know that, then you go.
Yeah, it definitely was strategy first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I like that it was. I like that it was 3 rounds, but it wasn't necessarily best of three.
Yeah.
Usually you would have 3 rounds, but it's like, all right, James wins this round, Chauncey wins the next round, whoever wins the next one is it. I kind of like that they had 3 rounds, but they had a running tally. And I also like that because of what the game was, where it was basically you had these 3 grids, you fill in the grids with the pegs, however many 3 in a rows you get, that's a point. I like that the way the challenge was, there wasn't a set number of points each round. So, like for example, the first round I think was 9-6, so 15 total. The next round I think was 6-5, so 11. 15 and 11. Like depending on your strategy, there could be 15 points available between the two people, or there could be 10 points. So I kind of liked how it wasn't a set number of, all right, first round this person gets 3, next round this person gets 3. I like that it was the strategy depends how the running total adds up, and I feel like that's something that we really don't see that often. And so that's kind of what I enjoyed about the fact that yes, there was strategy, but also the way the elimination was structured allowed all kind of 3 rounds to blend together.
Agreed. And it wasn't like you were saying, it wasn't your typical challenge puzzle that we've seen 1,000 times. This was one where honestly, like we really couldn't even tell who was doing good. Um, which made it unique of like I'm not watching a little tangram be made.
Yes. Yeah. And one thing strategy wise that kind of popped into my mind was if you're trying to make 3 in a row, would a good idea be to start on one of the ends?
A
And
hundred percent.
the reason why I say that is because the middle one had sort of like a bingo free space in the middle.
Yeah.
You notice that? And the other
Yeah.
ones didn't. But
A
they all kind of
100%.
gravitated to like, oh, we have to start in the middle. Why not start in
They're
the end?
idiots.
Put your ones right in the middle. You get the free space, and then you can work around that.
That was very clear after the first round. and neither of them changed their strategy for that.
Yeah, because they're idiots.
They're idiots.
Um, I mean, and then so what do we think? I'm trying to think of where do we finish up here because there was some unfortunate foreshadowing in terms of editing. I feel like because they played it up like James, and we talked about this on our Twitter thing. They played it up as like James is in the lead, but Chauncey, he's coming back. He has a good strategy. James is gassing out, and then the final score ends up being I think 18-17, so 1 point difference.
Shocker. There was always going to be a 1 point game. It was always going to be the closest elimination. It always is. It was very hard to tell the scoring. We mentioned that on the Twitter Spaces as well. It seemed like they were just showing the grid and then putting up a random number about it. So,
yes, and I wonder too if so. What is it? 23 challengers. If you have 2 of them in the pit, out of the 21 people in the stands, if they had to keep score, how many of them would actually keep score correctly? Because it wasn't like, how many totem poles are standing up at the end where they can
right.
just count. They had to actually count 3 in a row. So when TJ said early on, that there's 4 in a row, you actually get this 3 and this 3. I think half of the challengers just checked out at that point. They had no idea what TJ meant.
Who would you say is the smartest challenger on this season?
Smartest in terms of like
It's kind of like the tallest dwarf. Like to answer your question, because to answer your question, you got to think like, all right, well, who's just the most intelligent person here? And I don't think I have an answer.
I would probably shy away from all of the males, and I would maybe go Nerese or Olivia. I feel like,
Maybe.
at least from a challenge, trying to solve things perspective, they might know. And from the circle, that's a great pick.
He's an engineer. He's an engineer. People
He is
forget.
an engineer. And I think it was McCord that said he's becoming more Philly by the episode. I mean, that's just
Yes.
awesome.
By his last confessional, it's just like, I need like 2 sets of subtitles.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm trying to think. That's a great question. Probably a couple of the rookie, or not, I guess they're not rookies. DJ says who we don't maybe know about. Like I feel like Kylan kind of seems like a smart guy, but I don't know. I mean, that's just compared to like these idiots that we have on.
Tallest dwarf.
Yes, tallest dwarf. So James wins. Chauncey goes home. Like we talked about earlier, Chauncey was high on our power rankings. I believe he was a consensus 4. We all had him 4th overall. Now he's gone. He's the first guy getting eliminated. That's just a bad beat from him, and that might come up in some segments later on. But anything else on the elimination or just the episode as a whole before we get into some segments?
Yeah, I think the one thing that, and we've talked about this a lot, the one thing that I don't hate it, but again, this episode was big on the alliances, and they just defaulted into US and everybody else, which is fine and it's easy, but it seems like if Wes or Bananas, like a very good like political person in this game, would not give 2 shits what country you're from. He would be picking up all of the best people that he wants, a couple layups. They would be forming an alliance not based on I'm on team US. It would be I'm on team Bananas. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that is where like people separate themselves. And Jay kind of looks like he's starting to do that because early on in the episode, it talked about who he's with, and it started with all the US people. And then he started listing off people from the other side, which, if that's the case, then he's going to be in a great spot. But I do think it takes somebody who's actually willing to think and put together a plan to break that default barrier. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to your point, Jay seems that like he's probably one of the few guys that at least is willing to adapt and to meet new
Yes.
people and change his alliances, which like someone like Chauncey, for example, like he's so new to the game. He doesn't really have, he was riding Amber's coattails last season. So like he just doesn't really think that way. And I think Jay was on Survivor before. So like he kind of, knows how to do that. Somebody like Chauncey or I don't
Really,
know.
all of the cast.
Yeah,
They're
Iman
just like, oh,
Wall.
I'm
Like,
from I'm
yeah,
from Argentina, so I'm on not team not USA.
yeah. They really can't think that much further.
I know.
Their brains aren't capable.
No. So I hope we get a little mix of that. I'm sure we will, especially as numbers dwindle down. But the person and people who start to think these alliances are made out of nothing is going to do really well in this game.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of one of the benefits of having this weird format where everybody's kind of on one team, but also all on their own. Because if you have a season that's, 14 guy girl pairs, there's going to be 5 pairs through the
Yeah.
first 3 episodes that do nothing because they're just in the background. Whereas now it's like every single person is an option to get eliminated. So every single person's going to have to kind of step up and say who they're working with and all of that.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
that was my last thoughts.
okay, so let's get into a few segments we have here. Let's start. I have a few planned here, but let's maybe start with radar watch. So this is again people who are flying under the radar. So who's your pick for radar watch here?
All right, I'm glad I got the first pick because I really only have one. I think it's a really good one. Actually, I guess there are shit. I'm literally changing on the fly. I don't think this person said a word today. And very fitting for radar watch. Mine is who e.
God,
I mean, I had a name listed. It was not Hui, but then I thought about it and I was like, I really don't think she said a single word. I don't remember seeing her at all.
that's where I was gonna go. That's where I was gonna go. That's a great pick. I'm between two now. I think the person that I'm going to pick, and maybe you could make a case that they actually disqualified themselves because on tonight's episode they said they were flying under the radar. But I think it's too spot on to ignore that entirely. So I'm
Agreed.
just going to go with Kim Colleen as my radar watch.
Yeah.
She literally said, I'm flying under the radar, and up to that point, she was already going to be my pick because she hadn't done anything in the episode, and then the only thing she did was basically say, "Hey, I'm up for radar watch." So I'm going Kim and Colleen for my radar watch.
Good pick. Good pick.
There's a few other good options, but again, we'll save them for next week. Next segment we have tonight is going to be this day in challenge history. This is just going to be a quick one. It's not a trivia question, unfortunately, because we only have one episode that happened on November 1st. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. The person that got eliminated is actually a Stir the Pod rival, little Derek Kaczynski with his mohawk. He had it then, he has it now. He's doing his little podcast. So he's probably doing a recap right now, but you probably have to pay $32.99 a month. So just kind of, he got eliminated. So, fuck him. So that's this day in challenge history. Derek got eliminated. Next segment, we're going to try a new one tonight.
Oh, God.
We're going to try a new one tonight. We'll see how Trev likes it as well. But what I was thinking is this segment is going to be called Champ Change. And basically what it is we take the episode as a whole and we have to decide of the 3 major segments. So challenge, in the middle, house drama, all that, voting, and then elimination. If you could add one champ who is of the champs that are coming into this season, who would you add and why? Like, what would you see them doing as added as a part of this? So, for example, if we start with the challenge, and if our goal is to win the challenge, and again, you have to pick from. I think there's two champions who we don't really know because they did the USA seasons. So if we're picking from CT, Darrell, Brad, Devin, and then Tori, Laurel, Cara, and Casey, who would you kind of add to the mix for the challenge? So I'll just go ahead for this one. I'm gonna go with Cara. That might be a little out of the box pick. I'm gonna go with Cara because I feel like some of the guys are a little bit bigger, but I feel like Cara would be a good swimmer. She would have a good strategy. She'd be able to climb. She'd be able to do all of that. So what
So
would you say?
are you saying Cara for the daily?
Yes.
Okay.
So to just kind of start off the conversation for the daily, if you could pull in a champion to help the whole team, who would you pick?
Um, I think I'm going Devin.
Okay.
Devin's smarter than all of these clowns combined. And like I really do think that the only way that this daily was going to get accomplished, it's not by having somebody who's a physical threat. And I think it really is just having one single brain because out of 24, 20, 23 people, there were zero. Devin's there. He's hatching a plan to get this done. And most importantly, he's doing that at the beginning, and people are going to listen to him, and they're getting more than 3 balls.
That's fair. The reason why I didn't pick Devin is because I would actually pick him, and there's no rules against this. I would actually pick him for the elimination.
God, okay, so well, that's bullshit. You're making up these rules on there. I didn't know this twist.
No,
I,
you can pick multiple.
I thought you could only pick who you're going in the elimination.
No, just who would the best person be?
Okay,
But
okay.
skipping ahead to elimination, I actually would not pick Devin to compete in the elimination.
To be
I
on
would
the sidelines.
pick him to be on the sideline. I think Devin doing this against James has a worse outcome than Devin being on the sidelines and telling Chauncey exactly what to do.
Yeah,
I think if he does that, Chauncey wins.
I agree, and I like that pick. Um, I mean, I think that's the best pick for the elimination. I think for my elimination, I would probably give it to Jordan to do it because Jordan is just so damn good at everything. Really, the only time that Jordan's ever at risk is if it's something that like has to have two hands. He didn't have to have two hands for this. He's a smart guy. He's in shape. He'd be able to run laps around James. I think he would dust him.
Yeah, and to be honest, I honestly forgot Jordan was one of the champions, and I think that's the fault of MTV. Show Jordan on every episode preview somehow. Show all the champs. But yeah, Jordan or Devin, I feel like is the way to go for the elimination. For the middle part of the episode, if you're just as a viewer to add a champion to make it more interesting, I would go. I would go Casey. No, I'm just kidding. I would go.
Oh God.
I would. Honestly, I don't. I feel like there's actually not that many good options. I would maybe go CT for the only reason being like he is the old grandpa. So you would see, a Jay running to CT and being like, "Hey, I have this USA alliance, and Chauncey is, maybe going in. What do I do?" And CT mumbles a few lines, and Jay's like, "Oh yeah, you're a genius." So I'm going CT just from like a him playing into the part of what 2023 CT looks like.
See, I don't mind that, but it seems like in all the recent seasons CT's been on, he's been so reserved when it comes to that. Like he has just been so laid back, lets everything happen, doesn't get his hands really dirty with everything. Um, I really hate to pick the same person twice, but I mean, there are no rules. That's Dallas. I'm going to go Devin. Like, I think with all of this happening, with alliances being formed, I think Devin would be able to get everybody on the same page without getting his hands dirty.
He would kind of stir the pot.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm trying to think of what else could be good during. It would be fun if you were able to add Kara and Laurel for the middle part of the episode. That would create
Yes.
some drama, but I feel like on their own, not so much. I think it would be fun to add Tori for at least 2 different reasons.
Dabu mentioned Ashley. That's a very good one.
Ashley would be good.
I'm trying to think of who else is out there. All right, solo pod. Let's go. I like the concept. I think it would make for much more entertaining. I mean, we literally just mentioned challengers that would have completed the daily, who would have done better in the elimination and would have made for more entertaining deliberation across the board. So it's pretty easy to see that with all rookies or people who haven't won the challenge, there's a reason they have it, and it also does not make for good episodes on a regular basis. And it looks like Alex is having a little technical difficulties. So let's go. One-man band. I think we're pretty much done with segments. I think it was a good one. I think it's one that we should throw out there more and more. I want to get Trev's take as well. So I think, do you have any other segments, or you want to move on to MVP, LVP?
You got me still?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go to MVP, LVP.
All right, chat. Give us an order. I think it's going to be an interesting one. I had a much easier time picking my MVP, LVP this episode than last episode.
And what did we so as we wait for a quick order, what did we think about the segment overall?
I like it.
Champ change.
I like it. Champ change. And
so it's basically like envisioning a challenge episode like 8 episodes earlier or whatever it's going to end up being. Like if we had this group of champs in this season, what would be going on?
Yes. And my main closing thoughts for this segment was it's very clear that this season would be better with these people actually in it. You've got all rookies. They're not as entertaining. They're not as smart. It just makes for shittier dailies, worse eliminations, and less entertaining deliberations.
Yes. Exactly.
So maybe it's champ change, but it kind of shows that we're the chumps.
For now.
All right. Andy, Alex, I'll get us going for MVP. My MVP pick is going to be Jay. It's really for the reason that I mentioned about the alliances. Jay seems to be the only one with half a brain, I'll say. I think he's in a really good spot. I think a lot of people like him. I think he's a decent competitor, nothing crazy. And I think from the girls' side, it seems like Michelle also has a lot of alliances, and she's doing some politicking on the side just to add on to it. That was also nothing we mentioned. Did you see Callum give her like the good morning kiss when they were just like outside?
Yes. Yeah, they did that in like 2 seconds.
They have been hooking up regularly on this season, and we're just not even getting shown any of it. It makes no sense. Like it's not even like I'm mad that we're not seeing them hooking up. It's like I just don't even understand the logic to it. This is like the most like serious relationship of 2 competitors on this season right now, and we're seeing none of it.
And Melissa and Kylan went into the bedroom, and instantly they changed to a new scene.
It's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling. But I do think Michelle's got a lot of good alliances in the house as well, and I think Jay and Michelle have a like almost unbreakable alliance. And I could be wrong, but considering there's not a lot of past relationships of challenge, like alliances on this show, I think those two are looking like the leaders in the pack for who's running the game. And I think Jay's spearheading it.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I feel like Jay was kind of, even though he didn't win an elimination, or he wasn't like the biggest guy in the challenge, he kind of felt like the narrator of tonight's episode. He was
Mm-hmm.
kind of talking about how like the episode is progressing and the political moves and all of that. So yeah, Jay was probably going to be my pick. I'm not going to go Michelle because I feel like that's close enough. I'm looking for a different place to go. I would go Michelle, but I think I'm going to go with Melissa. I think
Ooh.
she just had a fun episode tonight. The fact that like in one of her confessionals when she said that she's kind of doing the show as an escape from her own daughter, which is just kind of this classic challenge. And then she's trying to kiss a guy named Kylan up on a stage, and you could say LVP because she got denied or whatever, but I think eventually they kind of made up. And I would just say MVP Melissa because she does seem to be in a good spot for the politics. Because she's kind of with the U.S. side. She's played with them before, but also she's UK, and she has Kylan backing her up. So I'm going to go MVP of episode 2 as Melissa.
Very good pick. She's also very bad. And I think she was the most, I think I would go undisputed. She was the most entertaining person on today's episode.
Yes.
However you want to slice it up, strictly entertainment, I think she was number one.
She was willing to go for it.
Yes.
Is
it me?
I'm up for LVP.
Is it you?
I think it's. Is it Trev?
It's Trev. Speaking of which, all right, your LVP.
All right, my LVP. I'm gonna go with Chauncey. I just think he had it's just a classic LVP performance. You not only lose an elimination, but you do it in a bad way. You basically make yourself an option. You kind of do bad on the challenge, and you lose to a guy named James, and just again, a guy we had decent expectations for, and to just go home episode 2, first guy eliminated. So I'm gonna go with LVP Chauncey.
Can I add on to that? Because that was the right pick. I think it almost got missed. I immediately put it in my phone because it was a perfect example of why he's the LVP. As he was leaving, he was, they were like showing him in slow motion. He was talking over it. I'm going home to my kid, and, I tried hard and all that stuff. And then he pulls out, I think this was Shakespeare. You got to take losses to win.
He said that?
Yes. In what world do you have to take losses to win? That's the polar opposite.
Oh, that's awesome.
He said that, and it was just like one, you're just an idiot, and two, that just epitomizes like why you just got eliminated from this show. You got to take losses to win.
That's so good.
I mean, that was one of my Chauncey or Nelly T. All right, I'll bring us home for LVP. I've got a couple on here. I don't love many of them, so I'm going to give my LVP to somebody who didn't even have the audacity to show up. My LVP is going to be Trev.
Wow.
I mean, I never thought that we were going to have to break out the "you do not want to go home now" line this early in the season, and he's already going home. I mean, that's just, some people are all in, some people aren't. Being all in is like a pass-fail challenge. You can't be 50% all in. You're either all in or you're not. We're all in. Mikey the Doctor, Ryan McCord, Dabu, they're all in.
Yep.
Trev's just not all in. I hate to say it, but I got to hold people accountable.
LVP Trev.
All right. Do you have any honorable mentions? I've got a couple.
No, you go ahead. I think I was going to say Trev probably.
So I've got one for LVP. Honorable mention LVP for me is going to be Nerese. She tried hatching a plan in episode 1 for the daily. She talked about how they didn't have a plan, or the plan went wrong in episode 1, so maybe this isn't the right plan. She's kind of just bitching and moaning this whole time and not showing up. I think she had problems hooking her harness. They threw her off the ladder. I mean, she's kind of doing nothing to help the team, but she's very quick to bitch and moan about the team. I hate that.
That's a good point.
And then
LVP Raven.
that's a good one.
She put herself into places that she didn't need to be in.
Yep. Yeah, and now, I mean, even before episode 3, she's looking like a early candidate for being voted.
Yeah, exactly.
And then my last honorable mention for MVP is more of just a smirky one, but I want to give it to Aman Al. He's kind of just hilarious. Like, I don't know if you saw his like little dance moves in the club, and like he was wearing that little hat during deliberation. Like, he's kind of just a very smirky guy, and he might be my favorite in this whole season.
He kind of feels like what a real life Pokemon would be like. And I don't really know how to describe it past that. But it's kind of just weird that somebody like Emmanuel exists.
Yes. There really is no way to describe it, but I think a real life Pokemon is spot on at the same time.
Exactly.
I love it. I had to give him honorable mention. He's probably going to get a lot from me this season. I hope he stays on, knock on wood.
All right, just a few housekeeping things before we wrap up here. I'm going to try to stick to this every episode to check in on our season props. Number of episodes, obviously, we're just adding on. Over under half a person getting kicked off, getting kicked off or quitting. We're still below that. Number of elimination wins by mercenaries, we're below that. And unique challengers to be called via FaceTime. I don't think that happened this episode, right?
Correct. I don't think we had any calls.
So I feel like nothing has really happened in terms of that yet. And then last thing, should I play the video?
Blow me.
All right, here's our last little thing for tonight.
What video?
I guess you are live, coming here with a brand new Stir the Pod. As you can tell, I am not live tonight. Hand up, completely my fault. Directing a basketball game, first game of the year. I know. Hand up. Early nomination LVP. I think I might throw myself into the elimination this week. So, like I said, my fault. I take full ownership. I'm 1 for 2 this season. I'm slacking. I know you guys have been hard on Andy. Andy's 2 for 2. He showed up. He showed up even when Chelsea hasn't shown up, and just like how they won on Monday. But yeah, I'm not here. So I need you guys next week to just rattle my cage. Give me all the shit. I deserve it. But tonight's episode, hopefully it was a good episode. I'm praying it's a good episode. I know last week I was very wishy-washy on it, even though I thought it was really bad. So my MVPs tonight, my MVP is going to be Alex and Andy. I think the Burges. I'll just call it that, the Burges. I mean, they stepped up in time of need. They supported me, and they're there tonight with you guys. My LVP tonight, an easy LVP would be me. I'm not doing myself. My LVP tonight is got to be Fezzi. Fuck that guy. Fezzi is the worst. The fact that I saw him on my timeline earlier today, I think Alex sent something and he came up, just ruined my day. And, he's not even on the season and he's got real estate in us. I mean, he's the LVP. He sucks. Get him off. Delete everything. So, love you guys. Shout out Duffy. See you next week. Tune in. I'll be back. Rattle my cage. It's going to be nuts.
God.
It's making me want to change my LVP pick because the fact that he just gave Fezzi an LVP is just Christmas came early.
Well, we'll rattle his cage like he says next week.
Yes, certainly will.
Anything else from tonight's episode? Any of the segments? Anything else before we go here? I feel like tonight's episode was a step in the right direction. I feel like it was better than last week. I feel like it was a good episode. I feel more confident about this season. I'm not going to say I feel 100% confident in it, but I feel more confident than last week. And the good news is every episode right now, we're a week closer to getting the chops in. And I feel better about the season. And I feel like tonight was a good pod, so I'm in better spirits.
Yeah, it seems like it was a better episode today and a better pod today. Any reason why?
Oh, God.
I'm just asking questions.
We'll get into that. All right. So with that being said, thank you guys for listening to another Stir the Pod. Be sure to follow us at Stir the Pod. Trev might be back next week. We'll see. But for the time being, love you guys. Shout out Duffy. Bye-bye.
Love you guys.
Love you guys.